Hello and welcome to a new video. This is for Pre-Algebra Math UC Lesson 28, where we're talking about military time. So just a couple lessons ago we talked about adding and subtracting time, and so the difference here is that when we do military time, that's when basically instead of having 12 hours and then starting over, we have 24 hours and then start over. So this also means that instead of using AM and PM, we just are able to use numbers from 0 to 24, I think, for hours. I just realized like the time between midnight and 1 a.m. on military time might be like 0023. I hadn't really thought about that before. So here's how this is going to work. Military time is 4 digits always. So if you don't have 4 digits, you'll need to add a 0 in front. We still have the issue of minutes. There are 60 minutes in an hour, so we still have kind of a weird regrouping or borrowing thing that will happen. And we don't typically put the colon in between hours and minutes with military time, so it makes it, in my opinion, a little bit harder to remember. So our first example here, we're going to change to military time 3:35 a.m. Since it's a.m., that means we don't add 12 to the hours. We just say this is going to be 0335. That is military time. The military time equivalent of 3:35 a.m. Whereas on B, where we've got 4:12 p.m., we add 12 to the 4 so that we can figure out, because basically instead of starting over at 1 p.m., that would be 11 p.m. And 2 p.m. would be, no, not 11 p.m. This is only confusing because I'm not used to it. If I used military time all the time, I'd be like so good at this. So at noon, which is 12 p.m., we'd be at 1200 military time. And then at 1 p.m., we're at 1300. 2 p.m., we're at 1400. And so on. So that at 4:12 p.m. we're at 1600, and then the 12 just goes right next to it. So that's how we change to military time. When we're changing to standard time, we're doing the opposite. So what that looks like is that if it's a number, if this part of our number is bigger than 12, we start by subtracting 12. And because that number was bigger than 12, we know that our time is supposed to be p.m., not a.m. So the bigger the number, the farther into the day we are. And we start counting at midnight, right? So 19 minus 12 is 7. So this would be 7:20 p.m. And you have to put that p.m. there when we switch to standard time, so that, because there's a difference between 7:20 p.m. and 7:20 a.m., right? If it's not a number, right, we look at the first two digits. If it's not bigger than 12, we don't need to subtract. We just say, okay, this is 1:34, but it's a.m. because it was a number that was less than 12 for our hours. So that's how that's going to work, switching between those. Now, let's look at what might happen with adding or subtracting military times here. So we are going to have to regroup or borrow just like we normally do, and it's actually going to be very similar to what we do with with regular time, standard time. It's just, to me, it's a little bit trickier because we don't have a separation here reminding us that, okay, these 2 digits on the right are minutes, the 2 digits on the left are hours. Because when I do 43 plus 21, I actually get something bigger than 60, which means that I need to carry. Even though, like, our normal rules give us 64, which wouldn't mean we would carry over to the next thing. The only reason we're carrying is because there's only 60 minutes in an hour. So we real quick say, okay, well, what's 64 minus 60, which is going to give us 4. So instead of it being 64, it's going to be 04, and we're going to carry an hour. So 04, put an hour up here. Then 1 plus 7 is 18. 17 plus 1 is 18, plus 3 is 21. This would be 2104. For our military time. And the next one works really similarly with this idea. You also have to carry on this one. Because 0 plus 2 is 2, 5 plus 4 is 9, but 92 is too big. So we have to do 92 minus 60 and then carry a 1 over here. So instead of it being 92, it's going to be 32. And then 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 4 is 7, and 1, 17, 32. So really, in a lot of ways, it's not different from what we did with standard time. And the same is going to be true here for when we're subtracting. We have two methods that we talked about before. One is to borrow, like normal, and the other is using the difference theorem, or the same difference theorem, which says, oh, hey, since 1255 is really close to being 1300, it's just 5 minutes shy. If I add 5 minutes to each of these, then this actually becomes a way easier problem. That would make this be 2355 and minus 1300, and then look at how easy that would be to subtract, because that would just be 55, that's 0, that's 1, so that's 1055. That's one of the ways to do it. The other way would have been to say that 50 is not as big as 55, so we're going to need to borrow from our hour column. And that's what I'll go ahead and, well, I didn't have to do that actually on this one. So I'll do that again, but with borrowing. Because I want to show both ways. I think you should pick the way you prefer. And honestly, it might be that just sometimes you think to add to both numbers and sometimes you don't. What I would do is I would actually look at this as 50 minus 55 and realize, okay, I need to borrow an hour. So that's going to make this be a 22 instead of a 23. But I have to add 60 minutes to 50. So 50 minutes plus 60 minutes is 110 minutes. So then I have to think, what's 110 minus 55? And don't hesitate to like go out to the side and do this subtraction if that makes it easier. Because then now we're borrowing with normal rules and we end up with 55. Yeah, 55. And so then that goes here. And then 2 minus 2 is 0. That's a really terrible looking 55. 2 minus 1 gives us 1055. But basically, it's just weird for us to think about, but like it's easier actually in some ways to say, okay, well, what's 21 minus 12? So you can decide if you need to borrow. And if you don't, you can just do subtraction like normal. If you do, then you have to borrow an hour. So you add 60 to the top number. So 21 minus 12 is 9. So this will be 0, 9. And then 10 minus 2 is 8. So that's 0809. So that is the gist of adding and subtracting and working with military time. This was lesson 28 of Pre-Algebra Math UC. And I also had my kids do, or my students do something else this week as well. So you can look and see another video probably coming up this week on simplifying radicals, which is a topic that will be good to see before algebra, because then it'll be easier when you see it in Algebra 1. So thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in the next video.